Okay, I'm going to start right at the very beginning. Created a scene, a little kind of animation world. And hide that camera. Right, and I've created a cube. It's just 1 unit by 1 unit by 1 unit. And I subdivided it, gave it 10 subdivisions. I've gone ahead and deleted the history for that object. I'm going to go ahead and just name this my cube. The other thing I'm going to do, so all squared at the very beginning, is just to modify freeze transformations. Alright, so I'm ready to start animating. Before I do any keyframing though, I'm going to go up to Preferences, Settings, and for now I'm just going to leave this where it's at. So 24 frames per second, which is the film standard. Probably might be a good idea to go with the NTSC 30, which is television standards. But for now, we'll just leave it at 24. It will save us a few frames. Just something to keep in mind. The other thing is down in the preferences for the time slider, the default actually is play every frame, which is Maya's way of just trying to play the animation as fast as it can. So we're just gonna change that so we can see a real-time preview of what we're animating. I'll hit save. If you've not animated that much before, remember we have the time slider here, which is our current time, and we have the range slider here that we can use to zoom in and out of a range of keyframes that we're looking at. So let's just zoom that in just a little bit, and I want to do just a quick little animation. We're going to make the box slide from one side to the other and then back to the center. Okay, so I'm going to select the cube itself. Oh, I guess the other thing I should mention is that I did go ahead and move the pivot for the cube down here at the bottom. Later on I'm going to create a little bit of a rig for this box for us to practice some animation. So just move this down so I have the idea where it is on the floor. You don't have to do that, but that is what I did here. So if you're wondering why that's not centered, and yours might be. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. When you keyframe, certainly you want to keyframe where you want something to go, but you also have to set a keyframe where you want something to stay or where you want it to begin. So move my time slider to frame 1, select the box, my cube, and I'm going to animate it in the X direction side to side. So I'm just going to keyframe that channel. It's a good idea to only keyframe stuff that you need, because sometimes you'll just start keyframing all over the place and you wonder why you have weird results happening. It's because you somehow start animating scale when you didn't mean to, or rotation. So we'll talk continually about that throughout the semester. So let's key selected here. Let's go, I don't know, I'm just making some guesses here. I haven't really mapped this out. So we'll go to frame 40 and then make our move. So I've moved it to a new location, and I'm going to right click and say key selected. And then, I don't know, we'll go to frame 80. Let's actually make that one up to frame 100. So you can see as I set the keyframe and I made a change, because I didn't record that change, Maya only knows what's been recorded. So from frame 40 on, it's just going to stay whatever the keyframe information is for 40 until I make a change. So let's go to frame 100. I'll move that right there. And again, I'm going to right click and key selected. And we'll go to frame 140 maybe. And I could either copy and paste or whatever, but also because I froze transformations, I can make it go right back to 0. And again, I'm going to click on the word here. You can hold down the left mouse button to highlight multiple attributes in the channel box. I just need translate, and I'm going to right click, key selected. If I hit S, it would record everything, and I usually find that's a very bad way to work unless you've totally gone about creating a really good character rig with set attributes that only, the ones you only want animated. So for now, we'll manually do that, would be best. So let's go ahead and play our animation. Okay. So you can see it's moving side to side, and it also is doing a little easing in and easing out because of the default preferences, the way that the keyframes are set up. So we need to go look in the GraphEditor to see how this animation is unfolding. So Window, Animation Editors, GraphEditor. And move this over the side a little bit. So we'll certainly talk about this in class quite a bit, how this functions, but this is the GraphEditor. In fact, maybe let's just go to the default. So here's the default view of the GraphEditor over in the channel box. And if you select a range of keyframes or an individual keyframes that you have, Maya will try to frame and scale everything to that best proportion. So what we see here is the cube and its translate X attribute, and it's within the time slider, so the GraphEditor. And the bottom of the GraphEditor is time. Seems pretty evident. And then the vertical axis is amount, and that could be amount of rotation or translation. It could be a custom attribute like, squint or smile that you might create for a character. So, the one thing that's happened is the automatic keyframe has been set up so that it's trying to do auto weighting, and by that it means it's trying to do a transition between these keyframes as possible. So these curves are basically like Illustrator, and I can modify them to change what the animation itself looks like and what it does. Okay, so I can tilt those. They're auto weighted, so they're balanced with each other. So if I move one here, this tangent will respond equally and proportionally to that, right? So this is why what we see in our animation is slow and then a constant speed and then slowing and then a constant speed and then slowing and getting faster and a constant speed and slowing, right? So there's lots of different ways we can change those keyframes. So we could break the tangency to change the type of keyframe it is. So as I'm rolling over these, down in the far left-hand corner, it'll be probably hard to see in the screen capture, it's telling me what kind of tangents it's trying to do. So this would be automatic, spline tangents, clamped tangents, linear, flat, stepped, plateau, okay? And then we can break the tangency and how they work with each other. So let's just change that to, in fact, let's select all those and say linear. Right? So now our animation looks more like a machine. It doesn't slow down at any one point. It just goes whatever that speed is from point A to B, from B to C, and C to D. So let's take this one here and let's just go ahead and choose a flat tangency. So we should see at the end of this one, so it's going to do basically ping, pong, and then ease into place, right? Let's take this one and let's go ahead and tell it to be spline tangency, but let's break that tangency so that each one of these could be its own thing. And let's make this one flat. And while I'm doing this, I'm holding down, I've selected the move tool and I'm using the middle mouse button to change how those tangent handles work. And I'm going to take this one and make that flat as well. Right? So we have this very slow, they should go very fast and bounce basically, and then get very slow here and pick up speed and ease into that one. Right? So the same keyframes, well, we've seen 3 different animations. One that's smooth with a little bit of easing in and easing out, which is fine. A linear approach, which sometimes is an easier way to start, so you can figure out basically where everything's going, especially when you're dealing with characters. And then approach here where we get a bounce. So certainly if we were doing a bouncing ball animation, when the ball comes down on the ground, we wouldn't want it to ease onto the ground. Gravity is taking effect. We would want it to hit very hard and move on. So this is the basics of the graph editor. There's a lot of other things that we can do in here, but just knowing those basic steps will do a lot for you. All right? So we'll stop there and move on to the next.